I am so excited to announce that iDriveAClassic is now sponsored by Adrian Flux, one of the UK's leading classic car insurers. If you're looking for classic car insurance, I've popped a link to Adrian Flux in the description box below. Hi guys, it's Steph from iDriveAClassic. Now I'm sure I definitely said in my last video that was the last video for 2020, but then I thought it's 40 years of the Metro, what are we doing? We haven't had a Metro video this year, so we're going to end the year on a high note and we're going to see it out with this Austin Metro HLE. Now if you live abroad, you may have never seen one of these in your life, but it was one of the most popular cars of the 1980s in Great Britain. So popular in fact that even Princess Diana had one. Hers was red, but not quite this shade. Now, going back to the point, if you've never seen this car, you're in for a treat because we're going to go around the outside, we're going to have a look inside, we're even going to have a look at the amazing split level seating, and we're going to take him out for a drive as well. Because if you've noticed the number plate, his name is actually Timmy, so I need to make sure I don't get that wrong today. Now, the car's owned by one of my very best friends, Ryan, and it got me started with my love of Metros again over the last few years, and hopefully it will give me my enthusiasm back for Metros again today. So let's kick off by having a look around the outside. When it was launched, the Austin Metro was said to be the British car to beat the world. Arriving in a really new automotive world where competitors not only came from mainland Europe, but Japanese manufacturers as well, who seemed far more organised and advanced when it came to making cars which people not only wanted to buy, but found to be consistent in a way that, well, they'd just not been used to, especially in the 70s. But the Austin Metro came out fighting. It had a £300 million investment of a new car manufacturing process, which included a new assembly plant and microprocessor controlled robots, which gave precise and constant quality to all stages of the build, which, trust me, if you've seen some of the 70s stuff, you'll know was an absolute godsend and a real winner in terms of pushing marketing messages. The process was said to be so slick and refined that every Metro leaving Longbridge met the most critical quality standards ever developed for a high volume production car, which is big words when you're developing a car which is essentially bog standard budget motoring. There were 27 processes involved in the painting and finishing of the car, including undersealing and wax injection, which was incredible for the time because, of course, this is just cheap motoring. There were 5 models available at launch, including your base spec, the L with additional comfort, including the split action rear seat, which I am going to demo for you later, the HLE as we are testing here today, which was said to be the fuel economy specialist, with additional features on top of what the L offered, the 1.3S, which boasted a far more sporty interior, which weirdly includes the mention of a clock, and top of the range, which was the 1.3 HLS. It had every bell and whistle and velour upholstery. What a time to be alive! To delve deeper into the specs, and the spec for this car in particular, the HLE as we're testing here today came with extras on top of what the L had. So these included the styled halogen headlamps with bright surrounds and integral side lamps and indicators, a side rubbing strip, a glow ring cigar lighter, a clock, push button radio, and of course that famous economy engine. Now it's worth noting that anything that you don't see on the walk around that I've just mentioned there, we'll have a look through when we get inside the car. The steering on these is exactly what you'd expect. It's rack and pinion, and it's got a 33.5 foot turning circle, and it's 3.3 turns lock to lock. And coupled with the amazing visibility and higher seating position, it's no wonder that these were the go-to car for the British School of Motoring for many, many years. The brakes on these are dual circuit hydraulic system with a circuit failure monitor. Discs to front and drums to the back, coupled with the 998cc engine, give us really sharp braking and short stopping distances, and make it safer to use in modern traffic than some of the other older classics. As you'll see under the bonnet, it's single SU carb on these with mechanical fuel pump and a decent 6.6 gallon tank hidden away under the floor pan at the back. Now when we're out driving, I will demo it for you, but we are running on hydrogas displacers for our suspension. These have been replaced by the current owner, and when running correctly, they are said to be akin to riding on a magic carpet. If you're watching this video with the intention of buying yourself a Metro, to get these units done yourself, you'll be looking at the best part of £1,000 to have the whole system overhauled. I did it. I think it was a good investment, and realistically you can't really drive them if they are down on the haunches, so just be aware that's something to be prepared for if you are looking to buy one. However, when the car was sold, it was said to only need servicing every 12,000 miles, so perhaps you can put those few pennies saved towards the new hydrogas units. For those of you watching from abroad and thinking, gosh, what is this tiny, teeny little car with an NCAP safety rating of 0, and was it really that popular? Well, look, it was so popular that even Princess Diana owned one, which they do reference in the latest series of The Crown, albeit it's completely the wrong model and completely the wrong colour, but I promise you I'm not bitter. Anyway, I'll hand over to Ryan, the owner of this fantastic car. He's had Timmy quite a long time now and has shared his thoughts on rescuing the car, ownership, adventures, and all the bits in between. So it's time for me to hand over to you, Ryan.
Hi, my name's Ryan, and as Steph said, I'm the proud owner of my Austin Metro HLE, which I've owned now for 4 or 5 years. Well, I bought the car because when I was little, probably about 4 or 5, my cousin Anna had a Metro as her first car, and I absolutely loved going around in it. I think because, you know, I was only short at the time and the doors are quite low, I really enjoyed the fact that I could see outside really easily. And also I found it hilarious, the fact that her car was a bit ropey. And I remember 2 incidents in particular. One when we were at some traffic lights and she went to pull away and the seat collapsed and she ended up lying on her back, which obviously I found really funny. But also on another occasion, she couldn't get it into gear when we were at a zebra crossing and a man had to get out and come and help. And I know this sounds silly, but I loved the noise that the car made. As you've probably heard already, the gearboxes are really whiny, and yeah, I just thought that they were really, really fun. And you know, once I'd grown up, I always kind of found them very nostalgic. And I think when I was at the NEC in 2015, I had my Morris Minor on display. I went over and had a look at all the Metros, and it just really, really kind of brought all of that flooding back. And it was after that really that I decided I definitely wanted one, and started looking out for the right one to come up. Well, I bought Timmy, as I said earlier, from eBay, or through eBay. It's, as far as I understand, it was bought by the original owner and kept until about 2014, when it was bought in a house clearance. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to find out, despite writing to the previous owner's address, where or why the car came off the road, but I can only assume that perhaps someone gave up driving, for example, and it was put in the garage and kind of left there. As you've probably seen from the walk around, the car is far from perfect, and you know there are blemishes on it, so it certainly got daily use at some point. And when I bought the car, it needed welding doing on both front floor pans, and the front valance was rusty, and one of the wings was rusty as well. So I have no doubts that at some point it was used, you know, pretty much every day, and you know suffered the same rust problems as any other Metro. But the fact that it was laid up from you know, about 1992, from what I can work out, with only 28,000 miles on the clock, has probably, you know, done it a lot of favours in terms of preserving it in, you know, relatively really, really good condition, because you know, there is no rust on the wheel arches or any of the other key areas either. It's a really original car, and like I say, you know, despite the fact that it's far from blemish free, it's my car and I love it for what it is. I'll never forget the time that I took the car to a course with you know, with work, and I was coming back and it was kick-out time from the local high school, and I stopped at the Pelican crossing because they were all wanting to cross, and loads of the kids were pointing and laughing at the car and saying, I think one of them shouted out, "It looks like Noddy's car," which I found quite funny. I'll never forget also once when I was out with Steph, we were up in Yorkshire, on the Yorkshire moors, and had just pulled away after having pulled over for something, and it was a really, really steep hill. And I went up to second gear when perhaps I should have just kind of admitted defeat and held it in first. And yeah, this cyclist actually overtook us, which was hilarious. Maybe unbelievable, but honestly, it did happen. Another one, just hilarious for the fact that it's a metro in 2019 with people going around in it. We were out and about and there were 5 of us in the car. We went on a day out to Oxford, bumbling around these roads and speeding down the motorway, with 5 people in the car. I just find it hilarious.
I wanted to bring you inside and talk you through. Now, I think one of the things that will surprise people watching this is just how spacious inside it is. Because when you look at it from the outside, you think it's going to be really cramped. But if you remember, this was sold as a small family car. So it had to be big enough to fit the whole family in. And I think it does a pretty good job. Now, what we've got inside here, we have got a little bit more than your base spec, like in my car. So if you ever watched the video of my car, you'll know that it hasn't really got much. So this has got a bit more. With the first thing being the glove box. Over here, we've got the glove box, which is great. I would love one. They were only ever put on the higher spec cars. And then coming into the middle, you've got your heater control unit. Now, the heater on these cars is usually amazing, but this one is a bit problematic. So unfortunately, the heater matrix has been changed, but it sounds like it's got a problem with its flaps. Ladies at home, we can relate. Now, coming down from that, we've got our cigar lighter, and then you've got your factory fitted radio. Now, this is a medium and long wave radio, and one of the nicest things is it has got that little Austin logo on as well, with the 3 blue bars. Again, just really nice detailing. You could also get these in cassette tape version, which is what I've got in my car, obviously aftermarket fitted by myself. It wasn't standard with it being a base spec car. Now, coming in front of us, we have got a very different dash layout to what we've got in my car. So I almost wish that I'd done some footage with mine, but mine's in storage at the moment, so I couldn't really drag her out for filming. Now, on mine, to the left-hand side where the clock is, I have got my temperature gauge and fuel gauge split, so like 2 half semicircles. Now, in this, it's a little bit different because you've got your clock, and then the 2 gauges there where you see the fuel and the temperature. On mine, that's just a gear pattern. What a waste. And then over on the right hand side, of course, you have got that speedo. Now, another really interesting detail on these is you can see the warning lights in the middle, and you've probably just thought to yourself, why is there a blank space in the middle? Well, that's because on the earlier cars, so I think 80 and some 81, I know mine's an 81, it's got it, but you never seem to see it from 82 onwards. That's where your seatbelt warning light would have been. But of course, they were looking by this point to try and cut a few costs, and one of those was they thought, well, people know if they've got seatbelt on or not, so they just cut that out and they took it out, hence why there's a blank space there. Now, coming in front of us, we've got our 2 stalks, very traditionally laid out. So on your earlier British cars, you would have had your indicators off to the right hand side. On this, it's a little bit more conventional because, of course, when it was sold, it was British car to beat the world. So it's done on the, at this point, more traditional indicators to the left styling. So you've got indicators to your left here, and you've got your main beam, and you've got your horn as well there. Now, coming over to our right hand side, we've got the wipers. As you can see, we've got 2 speed on those. Now, you will have noticed a rear wiper, so let me show you where the controls for those are. Now, coming down to my right hand side, I'll talk about this dubious this dubious switch in just a second. So you've got rear heated screen, your hazards, your fogs. This dubious switch here is for the fan heater. Don't ask. And then on the right hand side there, we have got the rear wiper. It's a great little car. I want to take you out in it, but before we start it up, I'm going to talk to you about this gearbox, because if you're eagle-eyed, you'll have already spotted that 4th gear isn't marked as a 4th gear in this, it's marked as an E. So let me explain that. Now, the transmission unit on this is a hydraulically operated diaphragm spring clutch. We've got 4-speed and it's an all synchro gearbox. Now, really interestingly, the final drive ratio on these HLEs is 3.44 to 1. But if you'd gone for another 1 litre, so like mine, for example, with just the standard 4 gears, you're looking at 3.647 to 1. So what does this mean when we're behind the wheel? Well, it kind of means that basically you can cruise at much higher speeds, at much lower revs, which really gives you that fuel economy. But the only payoff is it is a little bit gutless when you're trying to get up hills and stuff like that. It's much slower to accelerate than some of the other 1 litres that I've driven. And in fact, I know that Ryan kind of mentioned that we got overtaken by a cyclist. This is indeed true. We did get overtaken by a cyclist. But the great thing about this car is when you get onto a motorway and you put your foot down, you get amazing fuel economy. So I know that Ryan has got up from me. So I live up in West Yorkshire. Ryan lives down on the south coast. And I know that he's done it for like less than 20 quid before. And it makes it, honestly, it does insane mileage for so little money on long journeys. But round town, you don't feel it as much. But it's one of those things, and it was a really interesting idea, and it's a really interesting, not gimmick, but when you think about the fact that this car boasts 60 miles to the gallon when driving at a steady speed of 50 miles per hour, it's pretty impressive for a car from the early 80s. So let's get it started up. Remember, him. Let's get him started up and listen to that engine. So remember, we've got that A plus 998cc under there. Would have liked a 1.3, but hey, we'll take what we can get at this stage, and I'll let you have a listen. If you can hear that noise, it's actually the clock. It's very slight, so you might not hear it at home. I'll get this car started up. This is where it gets really clever. So these seats were on every single Metro apart from the standard. You can see you can fold them both away to give you lots of space there, or you can split the seats because of course you can get 3 adults in the back there, so you can split it down, which is actually something that we did camping. That parcel shelf is removable, so when you are dividing the seats down, you just divide it like that and they come forward, but you can get so much in there. So when we went camping, we're 1 person in the back and we were able to divide those 2 seats for all the luggage. Handy, eh? So I thought what we'd do is walk you up through the gearbox. Now listen out for that gearbox whine, it's one of my favourite things. A bit like the Anglia, you'll hear what I mean in a minute. And just like that, we're up into that 4th gear there, or the E as it would be called. Now, as you can see, it cruises absolutely effortlessly. I'm going to try and find a hill today to take you up to show you all what it's like, because it does get a little bit gutless. Another thing with Metros is that, especially when I was younger, is that they were known really as a bit of a pensioner mobile, something that Granny or Grandad would have to go down to the local post office to pick up the pension, or maybe to their local branch of Summerfield to pick up some groceries. It was never really seen as a very cool car. But just like things come back into fashion, the humble little Metro is quickly gaining status as a bit of a fun hot hatch, which I'm not really surprised at, because it is not only quite good on handling, because as you can see here, as we're going round, there's real minimal body roll, and because we've got that hydrogas suspension, it's really taking the bumps in its stride. And once people have stopped laughing at them and they get in them and go for a drive, realistically, they do drive so much better with the hydrogas done. Without it, it does feel a bit jarring. But as soon as people get into these and they stop laughing and they start listening and they start experiencing, many naysayers do change their opinion of the Austin Metro. Now, back in the day, it did really well in that small car market because it was an offering from the world of what was British Leyland and was becoming Austin Rover, and it provided something quite different, because a lot of cars had come before it that people were readily taking the mickey out of, the Marina, the Allegro, and people were just kind of a bit turned off by the world of British Leyland. Now, when the Metro came into play, people were saying, wow, it's different, it's unique, it's new. And I'm not really surprised, because British Leyland didn't do what they'd always done and looked inward and thought, what do we want? What do we think people like? They actually went out and they canvassed for opinion. So they spoke to fleet managers, they spoke to the kind of people that would buy the cars, like Royal Mail, and they said, what is it that you want about a small car that we can bring to market, that we can provide? And it was coupled with the fact that they spent, I believe, 300 million developing the Metro up. A lot of that was spent on the plant, because if you've ever watched any of the adverts for these, you'll know that it's one of the first cars to be built by robots at British Leyland, or Austin Rovers, it was then known. So a lot of the money went into that, and to keep it an economical small car, it's why they stuck with that A-series engine. So a lot of people kind of had very minimal expectations when this came to market. But actually, it saw off a lot of the competition. So a lot of people were saying, you know, look at what everybody else is coming out with. You had Renault, you had Fiat, you had practically everybody. You had the Japanese manufacturers that had come in and really brought something new, because of course you had things like the Starlet, you had things like the Micra. Things were coming in thick and fast that really competed in this small space. Now, there were so many things that people don't know about these cars at the time. They were, I believe, the most efficient for drag in their class in terms of aerodynamics. And once you get into it, so you can see there, actually cutting myself off, that it's a bit weak getting up those hills. But it provided so much. And one of the most interesting things is because the differential and the gearbox are located under the sump, it also managed to lose some of the length. So I believe, in terms of that super mini market, it's kind of 4 to 6 inches shorter without losing any space inside the cabin than its competitors. Do I fancy my chances in an Austin Metro in an accident? Absolutely not. There's really no crash protection in these whatsoever. But if you are looking in that super mini space, you're not really going to find it on any of them. Now, one of the things that I find really enjoyable about the Metro is that actually it's really comfortable. So, as you can probably see from the video and from the walk around, it's very roomy inside, which means that even somebody of my stature can drive quite comfortably, and that you can enjoy the drive and you don't feel cramped up. And although it does feel a little bit tinny, it doesn't feel as tinny and as flaky and as wish-washy as some of the other stuff in this small car market for the era. I think that they get a bit of a bad rap for rot, because I don't think they really rot much worse than many of the other 80s stuff. I think, unfortunately, they just got a bit of a reputation for it, because with it being a budget car and being so cheap to purchase, especially second-hand, people would just buy them and run them into the ground. So when people are constantly running the same model of car into the ground, the examples that you're seeing out aren't going to be good in their masses. Whereas some of the other small and some kind of mini cars, people seem to take a little bit more care over. So unfortunately, the Metro quickly became unloved. And so kind of 10 years down the line, and in fact, spoiler, and a little bit of an insert, is that these hydrogas units were only ever given a 10-year shelf life. So they'd started to sag as well. So they were sagging, they were rotting. So by the early 90s, they picked up the nickname Metrot, which actually is, yeah, it's justified, they do rot out, but every car does. But I think it's mainly down to user error and a bit of negligence. People weren't really looking after them because they were so cheap. I'll leave you with this. It's 40 years in the Metro. I hope we get to see 50. But will we get to see 60 apart from a few cars in a museum? I honestly don't know. I don't think it'll have the same shelf life as some of our cars from the 50s, 60s and 70s. And really, that is a pity. And with that, that's the end of our video. It has been a fantastic year on iDriveAClassic. I've tried to show you lots of different stuff, from three-wheelers to Mr. Bean's actual mini off the TV series, and all the bits in between, like a tractor, for example, and model cars. I really hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. It has been, although it's been a weird year overall, it's been such a great year, showing you lots of different stuff and keeping you entertained at home. Now, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get a much better 2021. We'll get a few car shows in, and life will start bringing us back round to normal. But wherever you are in the world, I'm sending my love because I know it's been a weird year. And until next time and until next year, take care and drive safely.